Alright, welcome back to the Agamemnon Game Review. Today's broadcast is being recorded on the 9th of September 2018, Sunday. Time is 12:03 a.m. Eastern Daylight Saving Time. Video was captured on the 30th of August 2018. This is part 2 of a two-part series. So running time on this is about 36 minutes and 8 seconds. So we're continuing out this grind in this area
Rustican's reign is over.
to save Rusticon. He's been stabbed. So we gotta collect all these ingredients to save his life. Heal his body, heal his spirit and his soul. Because we are the champion of Azeroth.
It is just as you said.
I was watching some of the composite video. If you ever watch a lot of the YouTube streamers or Twitch streamers, a lot of them have what are called reaction videos, where they watch like the trailers and you see the reaction to it, the initial reaction to it. And there's another group out there that takes those individual videos and they make a composite of that, so you see all the people reaction at the same time, which is pretty interesting. But I was watching the one with Sylvanas burning. It's based on the Sylvana Warbringer, and everybody had a very interesting reaction to when Sylvanas burned the tree, because I remember the day it came out, but people were really upset when Sylvanas burned that tree down. And there's a lot of reasons why people were upset, different reasons of why people were upset, but the genuine feeling I got from watching a lot of the videos was people were really upset. And I remember on Twitter that day, it peaked. Just to show you how impactful that story was. There were a lot of, for it to impact Twitter like it did, there were a lot of people upset that that occurred. Which kind of goes to think about that. World leaders, actors, people doing like TV shows worldwide all stopped to voice their opinion on Twitter about Sylvanas Windrunner burning down the world tree in Azeroth. That's kind of funny. I kind of felt that after watching that Warbringer story and the old soldier cinematic, and reading through A Good War and is that Elegy story, the novellas, and playing through the pre-patch stuff, I felt that Blizzard had to let Sylvanas burn that tree down. I felt it was important in that story arc of the character that they let her burn that tree down. It would be more impactful, it'd be more meaningful, and in terms of fantasy stories and the genre that World of Warcraft is in, you never really see female characters doing that. And I felt for that character, in that moment in time, as powerful as she was the war chief, she was the leader of Lordaeron. She had just massacred those Forsaken in the Arathi Highland. She's getting ready for war. She was in a war. And I think it was an important step in the character's arc that she had to burn that tree down. And it doesn't make any sense unless you've read Chronicles. In my opinion, it doesn't make any sense unless you read Chronicles. And it goes back to like in Chronicles Volume 1, where they give you the breakdown of the cosmology, and they talk about the undead. And one of the things that they said was that with the undead, and they kind of hint to it as you're playing along the story with Wasambi there, the undead, the lure of death. He's kind of against undead too. He said that undead were abomination to death. But I read this before, but I'll read it again. It says the undead are former mortals who have died and become trapped between life and death. These tragic beings derive power from the necromantic energies that pervade the universe. Most undead are driven by vengeance and hatred to destroy the one thing that they can never have again, which is life. And I think it's important because in her story arc, she's been undead now for 12 years in the story, and she, at some point, as she's growing as a character, she'd have to move into a direction of being an undead. I think if you, going back to War Crimes, when she's with Barisa, is the first time she sort of accepts that she's undead. Even if you go all the way back to Warcraft 3, where they free and they become the Forsaken, she declares her independent. I don't think she completely came to terms with being undead. I think her sole mission in life, even at that time, was just getting vengeance on Arthas. And when he came back in Wrath of the Lich King, and he ultimately was defeated, that was kind of the only thing that she wanted to do. And in the story between where she throws herself off of the Ice Crown Citadel, and she returns as the queen of the undead for the Forsaken. I forget what the name of the story is, but she started moving in the direction of accepting the fact that she was undead. And she's not just any undead, she's a leader in that, and she had to take on a real world sense of what that meant, the value, what is the one thing that undead value. And I think in the overall story of where we're at now with the battle for Azeroth, it was important for the character to grow as an undead person. And I think it's important in the story that Blizzard makes a distinction between people who are dead and undead. There has to be a clear demarcation in the story. That the undead are no longer alive, they no longer have the same values. Not that they can't have the same values, but their sense of values are different in that their needs are no longer food, water, shelter, and clothing. Their psychological needs are different. The 4 psychological needs, or at least humans, are what they call the 4 F's. Fighting, fleeing, feeding, and mating are your 4 psychological needs. And then, but the undead can't do any of those things. They don't eat, they don't sleep, they don't, they can't mate because they don't have internal organs. Their only thing in life is existing. There is no hope for the undead. That's why they're undead. That's why they're forsaken. Their allegiance to deities are, in a way, silly, because there is no deity that actually represents the undead. Even if you were to parallel Sylvanas with Helia, the Valkyr, and Wasambi there, they're not actually gods of the undead, they're gods of the dead. And the undead live somewhere between life and death. And if you look at the breakdown of the cosmology in their little guide they give you, they even show that the undead are on a tier slightly between decay and necromantic. They're on the same tier as the old gods, the titans, the wild gods, and the burning legion. As an entity, they're equal with all those in terms of power. Which is why I was suggesting the other day in one of the videos that the undead, just for being undead, because the undead could be different races, right? Or not just different races, they can be different classes. Most of all the undead are all humans, except for Sylvanas, who's a high elf. Which probably is going to change, because I hearing talk of the vampires and stuff, but we'll see if that comes to fruition. But based on what we know, in the world of Azeroth as it is today, as of 9th of September, the undead have not really been defined by the developers in the game. And that's why I feel that it was good that Before the Storm really centered around that issue. I was really happy that it centered around that issue, because prior to Before the Storm, the only time they really talked about it in the lore goes all the way back to war crimes. And it's only in a small snippet of discussion that Sylvanas and Marisa are having that this dialogue even occurs. And you get the sense from reading it that, at least I did, that the humans, the Alliance, and even the Horde for that matter, have no idea what occurred in Lordaeron under Arthas. They know the place was destroyed. They know that there was somewhat of a plague, undead plague, but they don't know the extent of what happened to the people that ultimately became the Forsaken. And at the time that it occurred, the Alliance was kind of split. They had just fought the Burning Legion. I believe it occurs after the stuff with Theramore. And because the stuff with the Forsaken parallels stuff with the Horde. And it occurs in the later second half of the I'm gonna call it expansion. It's Warcraft 3, you had the stuff with the Horde and the stuff with the Frozen Throne. So the stuff with Jaina and Theramore and the Horde gaining their independence, I believe that occurs in the first part of the story, half of the story. But then second half dealing with Sylvanas, people of Lordaeron and Arthas. That occurs later in the story, and it's mentioned in the book Before the Storm that one of the undead was a historian, and he was thinking about writing an eyewitness account of the story, because no one's ever written about that time period, and the girl, his daughter, hinted that no one knows what happened in that time period. And
I am listening.
Anduin kind of, I'm not gonna say he danced around the issue, because that wasn't his intent. He is one of the first characters in the lore that kind of acknowledges that, in the big letter that he wrote to Sylvanas to convince her to do this thing, the one-day event.
Watch yourself within our city.
He acknowledges that in the very beginning of the letter, that when the Forsaken had gained their independence, the Alliance had pushed them away violently, and it wasn't like a "oh, go on without us, we don't need you" type thing. Yeah, what it was, they murdered their emissaries, cut them up, chopped them up into pieces and killed them, is what they did. Very violently. And
step closer and don't mumble.
Sylvanas never got over that. She never got over a lot of things. And then since that time, and even in Warbringers, where she's rising as the Banshee, and she sees the little dead girl,
They say you have the heir of the throne?
there's more to her psyche than just that one moment. The culmination of her burning that tree down has more to do with the culmination of events that have happened
Give my regards to me.
over the last 12 years in the lore to the character, because
I've seen things that would scare you
her
shelless.
character kind of feels that she's been betrayed by everyone living. And so her fuel for anger has more to do with her hatred for the living. And as an undead, if you read the cosmology, that's a natural thing that grows with the undead over time. And I think that is the path that Sylvanas is going down, because it's her nature now.
Not everything in the ocean is as good
Whereas her nature
or
before
nice
was
mannered
to
as I am.
save the living, preserve
Come
life.
back with some better stories.
She slowly realized that it was all a lie in her mind, and that there is no virtue in the light and there's no virtue in the shadow, because the two things cannot exist without that. They're symbiotic things in the universe. But the undead in the story are the only people that are living outside this entire society, which I think is, for me, it's fascinating as a person to see in a story. You don't really see that in any story. Even in Star Wars,
Greetings,
there is
sir,
no
and
like
your ma'am.
force of nature that lives outside of the Republic or the Empire. You know, even if you play in the old Republic, where you have the Knights of Eternal Empire, it's still
I've seen things
Sith
that would
or
scare you
Jedi.
shelless.
See, there's no like entity as powerful as all those that sort of lives outside that. And I think the Forsaken in World of Warcraft are unique, which is why I kind of Blizzard is going in the direction of creating a
Greetings, sir,
third faction,
and your ma'am.
which is would be the Forsaken. I would think
believe I was done talking to you anyway.
that would be neat. But they should unite. I think the story should unite
Step closer and don't mumble.
the Forsaken and the Death Knights into one thing. Because if the Alliance have evicted Forsaken from Lordaeron, it's only a matter of time before they evict the Death Knights out of the Eastern Plaguelands, right?
Greetings, sir, and or ma'am.
I'm wondering if they're going to introduce a completely different continent of undead. And that's where the Forsaken are eventually going to end up.
Come back with some better stories.
Do you want something?
It would be funny if in the lore they find out that they can't kill Sylvanas. Which goes back to what I was saying. I think the Forsaken as a species should have an ability to resurrect. Kind of like they have the will of the Forsaken. The will of the Forsaken should have a component to it to where if you die or someone like slays you in the battlefield, you should be able to hit that button and reanimate yourself, because you can't die in the story, right? And they should have it so your body reanimates back. As the Forsaken. And that would be kind of cool. Because that's how the Scourge worked. Under Arthas, people would kill him, but then they would just reanimate. Right? They would just come back. And that's why Arthas used the undead and stuff, is because they were the one thing that... oop, cutscene. This is the part where they're explaining about Razan. It's kind of tall. This is a significant character here in the story.
Have you come to bargain? Never cower before the little king will rise. I am not finished with him. One Sandy.
Here's where we're first introduced
You got a bellow that would wake the
to
dead.
Samdi.
What you want, man? You have taken what is mine. Release him.
Long time you've been keeping this one from me. Long time. I'll be denied no further.
Know your place, lower of graves, or I will put you in one.
Comes a time when we all got to die, even kings. But I be feeling generous. Take your little friend. I'll be seeing you in good time.
It's significant. Now remember, we're introduced to Wasambi in Mist of Draenor
Restore
in the book
his spirit to his body.
Fulgen Shadow
My
of
priests call me back to my
Lord.
temple. Send Rastakhan to me when he finds his teeth again.
which once you start describing the story here with one zombie in a larger context, the title Vol'jin Shadow of Horde makes more sense.
can still feel the touch of the other side. My Loa has called me back to the land of the living. There is work to be done. Be you predator or prey?
Coming up on the last 10 minutes here.
Zandala forever.
You basically end up having to go storm these boats, kill all these dudes, kill this witch.
Rezan, reclaim my ship.
Greetings.
Then we will deal with the usurpers who tried to claim my throne.
The Chuka Zandala.
Here's where I change out my skills. I have been thinking about it over a couple of days, and this is where I committed to it. I wanted to keep this medallion skill because I think it's useful, because it's the only way to remove a stun effect or immobilize effect. And then I wanted the Felguard, Felhound, their skill, which is better on the toolbar. And then so on this next one, instead of having all these curses, I started thinking the curses and stuff were better. They're more affliction type things. So I went with pleasure through pain, and then I kept the Fel Lord, because he's a demon, obviously. And I felt that setup here was the best one that fit my character and would help me out better in PvP. Now, last night, as of the 8th of September, someone was trying to gank me, an Alliance guy, in Nazmir there, and I beat him. I was only 116, he was 120, but I ended up stomping the crap out of him. And I had that captured on video, so when that video comes up, I'll be reminding you of that. But he got the better of me about 3 times, but the 4th time he came to the well too many times, and I was ready for it. And I went with this setup. And at that point I had more Azeroth gear, and all my Azeroth stuff, because I was 116 and all my stuff had already hit the level 8 Azeroth power, or 8-point Azeroth power. So I had 3 different articles of clothing that had Azeroth gear, which was the headpiece, the chest piece, and a shoulder piece, and they're all maxed out, which gave me a heck of a lot of defense. And combined with these PvP talents, really saved the day. And it was from this moment that I started using the Succubus as a defensive character and not the Void Walker. Although I feel the Void Walker gives you a stronger defense. The Succubus, with this power, it shortens the time of your Shadow Bolt and increases the damage of your Shadow Bolt, which combined with your Azeroth stuff is significant. I think that's why we beat that dude the other day too. He wasn't ready for it, and we got the better of him. And I think it's because when I'm walking around with the Succubus, you can't see the Succubus until the attack begins, because she's invisible. And I like that. Because what the Succubus does, she has that little whip thing, which not only does knockback, but it also stuns. And, cause she's a crowd controller. And, not really a tank, but she can soothe people down. And it works even if they have you stunned. You can seduce people. And a lot of your demonology powers, as you increase in power, especially the Hand of Gul'dan, they can still be cast when you're stunned. So this is where I decided to log out here, I believe. So we're coming up on the final 30 minutes. Last couple minutes here. We got 3 minutes. I didn't want to go do all those adventures. So here's my Azeroth stuff. I ended up getting a new headpiece, but I took the newer one even though it was lower. Lower eye level. It had improve when you got to the 8.8 power points. The original headpiece could only do the initial 5 power points, and that's why I switched it out. But when you activate the final power, it increases the eye level by 5 for the item. So. I got this one power, which you'll see coming up in a couple days. It's a Sylvanas power, and gives you it improves your intellect, which is because it's based on people dying around you. And the more people start dying around you, your intellect shoots up. And a Warlock, if your intellect improves, you're gonna start knocking people out. So, just gonna do it for this video. We'll see you again in the next video. Till then, have fun, catch you later, and take care.